Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our 2023 Leadership in Academic Medicine lecture. Really, I'm Anupam Agrawal. I'm Senior Vice President for Medicine and Dean for the Heersink School of Medicine. Really delighted to welcome our honored speaker for this lecture series, Dr. Eric Neilson. He's the Vice President for Health Affairs and the Dean at the Feinberg Northwestern School of Medicine. Really give you this year's lectureship is really meaningful for several reasons. I'll provide some highlights of Dr. Neilson's key accomplishments, but the fact that he's coming back home, so to speak, he's an alumnus of our University of Alabama Medical School. So Eric, welcome back. Prior to joining the Feinberg School of Medicine as Dean, Dr. Neilson spent 13 years as the Hugh Jackson Morgan Professor and Chair of Medicine at Vanderbilt University School of Medicine. Just highlight some of his key things that he developed there. The largest department of medicine at Vanderbilt went through a growth strategy that tripled the size of the medical center's budget to a $2.4 billion enterprise. Under his leadership of the department, the practice revenues increased 300%. Research funding from NIH increased to $135 million. And the faculty grew more than 3 times, from 270 to 650 faculty. You'll hear about his accomplishments as Dean at Northwestern, in his talk. I'm sure you'll get a flavor of that. So I just wanted to highlight what he'd accomplished as Vanderbilt. He helped initiate the Vanderbilt Prize, which honors women in science. And during his tenure as chair, he increased the number of female faculty in the Department of Medicine from 71 to 198. His mentees have done phenomenally well across in academic medicine. 24 of his former students and fellows became professors of medicine. 27 of his former fellows and faculty are now department chairs. 18 are associate assistant deans, vice chancellors or provosts, and 11 have been elected to the National Academy of Medicine. He's a member of several prestigious societies, the American Society for Clinical Investigation, the American Clinical and Climatological Association, the Association of American Physicians, the Interurban Clinical Club, and the Association of Professors of Medicine. His other awards include, he was recognized in 2006 by our UAB Medical Alumni Distinguished Alumnus Award, the President's Medal, the John Peters Award from the American Society of Nephrology, the Robert Williams Distinguished Chair of Medicine Award from the Association of Professors of Medicine, and a Merit Award from the National Institutes of Health. In 2016, Dr. Neilson was elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and in 2022, the American College of Physicians awarded him a mastership. His prolific research is centered around understanding immune mechanisms and fibrosis within the kidney, and he was actually the first to describe how epithelial cells transition to become mesenchymal cells and essentially lay fibrosis and scarring of the kidney. So really, he pioneered the field and made some seminal, groundbreaking observations. He's published over 300 papers, reviews, commentaries, editorials. He served as the editor-in-chief of the top journal in nephrology, the Journal of the American Society of Nephrology. So really, we are honored to host such a distinguished physician, leader, researcher, educator, and an administrator. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Neilson. Eric.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Anupam. This is a great honor to be back home. It's been a long time. I had a wonderful education here. When I was here, I graduated in 1975 and they had the 3-year curriculum, so we went year-round for 3 years, and it was intense, but a wonderfully active 3 years. Tinsley Harrison was my teacher, John Kirkland, Burris Boschel, Tom Durant, Gene Ball, Claude Bennett, Max Cooper. There's just a wonderful group of faculty at that time that really made education fun, and I'm very grateful for that start. What I'd like to do today is tell you one story. It's just one story, and it's how we decided to change what we were doing at Northwestern Medicine. We began that change about a little over 10 years ago. And it's produced some results that are worth probably talking about. When I got there in 2011, we didn't really have any integrated interaction amongst the hospital, the practice, and the medical school. For those of you who don't know where Feinberg School of Medicine is, it's in downtown Chicago, right on the lake. And you can see there are our three hospitals are there: Northwestern Memorial Hospital, Lurie Children's, and Shirley Ryan Ability Lab, and then other medical school buildings. And they're all right there in a wonderful part of town. At the time I got there, we had these 6 entities. We had the Medical Faculty Foundation, which was the independent practice plan of 700 adult physician practitioners; Northwestern Memorial Healthcare, which is the adult hospital; the Jesse Brown VA, the Lurie Children's Hospital, and the Rehab Institute, now known as the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab. We also have an organization called the McGaw Medical Center. About 30 years ago, all the hospitals decided to create a service organization for all residents and fellows, and they're employed through the McGaw Medical Center, and they're accredited through the McGaw Medical Center. And it allows the residents to move all around the various entities without a lot of paperwork. The story I want to tell you today is about how we brought the adult clinical practice and NMHC together in a integrated environment. I always like this picture. Brittany Griffith is a hero of mine. She's a great wall climber. And in my past, I used to climb with my son, so we enjoyed those moments together. I don't do it anymore. This is her climbing a wonderful wall in Lake Louise, Canada. Flashing a climb means you climb it from start to finish in one episode for the very first time, completing it successfully. At the time we began our climb, NMHC only had 2 hospitals in Chicagoland. We had the 715 physician adult practice. It was separate from the health system and the university. The clinical departments in the hospital were not getting along. Financial performance in the practice was very uneven. At 27 different compensation plans, the school was finding it difficult to remain solvent, and NMHC couldn't acquire more hospitals if it couldn't have a better relationship with the adult practice. So we set out intentionally to be a premier integrated academic health system and serve patients first across a broad community. All these little purple lights shining are today our little places where we have outposts of Northwestern Medicine across Chicago. This is the lake and of course the Navy Pier, and we're just right up here, just to the right of that on the lake. We had to have a vision for this collaboration. We decided we would be open and transparent. We shared all our financial information, developed a 5-year strategic plan for reducing costs. We had to bring over 1,000 regular faculty, including the 715 clinicians, along with the idea of aligning. And we had to align and incent leadership across Northwestern Medicine through shared goals and measurable outcomes and incentives. Achieving a sustainable fund flow as part of this agreement was also important to the School of Medicine. And at the same time, we began with the university to launch a capital campaign. Now, our goals for integration were to create a single patient experience, to provide clinical excellence and research expansion with top talent, to align productivity and incentives, a melding of multiple cultures, create a durable and sustainable governance and management, improve the operation performance of the organization, and advance discovery to improve health, human health beyond the individual patient. It was a tall order, but they were all had some interconnection to being able to function as a highly integrated system. We had to create oversight committees. The parents here were the Board of Trustees for the university, the Board of Directors of the practice plan, and the Board of Directors of Northwestern Memorial Healthcare. We had our financial people work on our financial arrangements, and then we hired a common outside attorney to prepare any eventual documents we would use for integration. This committee met regularly through most of 2012 to work out issues. The CEO of Northwestern Memorial Healthcare and myself led that interaction. We reviewed the progress and approved decisions and actions that would lead us to a common place. We had lots of working groups. We had to involve lots of leadership and faculty. A lot of suspicion about doing this, so we had to work through that. We had to talk about culture, how we're going to communicate with each other, how physicians were going to communicate with each other, and what kind of compensation and benefits we were going to allow. In 2013, we completed the process of that integration. We signed an agreement with the university and the practice plan and the health system. The health system would give us a formulaic funds flow, 1% of net patient revenues, 5.5% of net operating cash. The Feinberg School of Medicine would still have all the clinical departments, basic science departments, centers, and institutes. All of the leadership in those organizations reported to the dean, but worked with the CEO of the health system. So everybody had an employment agreement with the health system, but had a university appointment and responsibility to teaching and, in many cases, research. The practice plan became a Northwestern Medical Group, and it became a single corporate member of NMHC, along with the two hospitals that it had at the time, Northwestern Memorial Healthcare in Streeterville and Lake Forest. So this is our start, and this is where we began. And we've had a decade of continued integration. Today, we have 28 departments, over 70 institutes and centers, about 4,700 faculty, about $650 million of research awards. We have very active residency and fellowship program, terrific medical students, pretty good rankings, wanting to improve those, of course, but those take time. Those are lagging indicators. If we look at who we were in 2022, which is the last complete set of data that we have, we had a strong financial performance. The school has never been insolvent since integration. As I mentioned, we have good rankings. The Shirley Ryan Ability Lab is the #1 rehab hospital in the country, and Northwestern Memorial has been ranked 9th as an adult hospital in U.S. News for a very long time. We have research and an academic space and about 10,000 individuals, faculty, staff, and students and trainees. Today, 10 years later, Northwestern Memorial Healthcare has 11 hospitals in about 200 sites across Chicagoland. We never purchased any hospitals, we just acquired them. We acquired their assets and we acquired their debt. And these were strategic decisions we make about being in certain areas so that we could cover Chicagoland in a way that would allow us to provide clinical care near patients' homes. Shirley Ryan Ability Lab, this is the Rehab Institute of Chicago, rebuilt their hospital and it recently opened about 5 years ago. Lurie Children's Hospital used to be in Lincoln Park, and in 2012 they built a hospital and came down and became a full member of the campus. Our research environment, we think about research like most research-intensive medical schools. We have lots of focused areas supported by a foundation of research underneath it. And these focused areas you'd recognize in almost any academic medical center: cancer, cardiovascular, neuroscience, transplant, diabetes, women's health, infection, resistance, human behavior. Every 5 years we have a retreat with all of our funded faculty. And we try and develop cross-cutting themes. So at the intersection of focused areas, we can think about what kind of recruitments we want to do in those areas, try and build on those commitments. As we have subsequent retreats, we don't throw out the old goals, but we continue to try and develop them together. We've had 3 retreats now. We're getting a little more picky about what we're going to take as strategic research opportunities, but they've been pretty helpful in getting people focused on common orientation of who we are and how we're going to get to a different place. Over this period of time, we've gone through, back in 2006, which was about 6 years before integration, they built the Lurie Research Building. That was filled up by 2010. And we began, when I got there, renovating space that hadn't been renovated in a long time. And then we began planning for a new biomedical research building, the Simpson Query Biomedical Research Center, which was opened in 2019. And during that period, the additional space allowed us to grow rather effectively with a compound annual growth rate of about 8.3%. This is the Simpson Query building. It's right now at 14 stories. It's only half built. It's built to take a tower, a 16-story tower on top of it, which we hope to start construction on in another year. And that tower will bring us up to 30 stories. In Chicago, you have to build up. There's no horizontal land to build on. And so we built quite a foundation for this building before we got started, but it's ready to go. Over in the background, I don't know if you can see it, because I don't know if this works or not. This doesn't work. But over in the background, up at the top there of the slide in the middle is the new Shirley Ryan Ability Lab. We also made a commitment with all of these new hospitals to expand our clinical research. We have had a 36% increase in total study participants in the last 4 years. We have about 6,100 clinical research studies as of FY22 and 39,000 enrollees every year. So right now we have a little over 350,000 patients involved in some research study across all of our different areas of practice. It's interesting to look a little bit at where our research funding is held. Clinical departments have the lion's share of it. The basic science departments have grown quite a bit in the last decade, and the institutes and centers have a few things going on. But we have faculty tracks, the classic investigator and physician sciences track, that's a tenure track, and then we have the clinician educator track, which is historically been for clinicians that practice. But it's interesting, between the clinician educators and the physician scientists, we have close over 50%, or close to 50% of our research funding coming from clinically oriented faculty, which was an intention. We designed this to make sure that we had a workforce, at least in investigation, that had some connectivity to clinical medicine. We follow a lot of metrics at Feinberg. One of them is our space productivity, because space is so precious. Right now we have a target productivity which has grown. It's about $1,000 square feet, dollars per square feet if you have a research lab. If you have a wet lab, it's about $850, and a dry lab about $1,600 per square foot. This is how we decide whether somebody needs more space, and this is how we decide whether somebody needs less space. We call this right sizing or densification on occasion when we have to. What's that?
Indirect costs included there?
It's total cost, yeah. We also make investments in research as a percentage of total direct expenditures. Those investments look like they've come down from 43 to 36, but that's because we've had a large growth in our research portfolio. So we have pump priming that goes on every year, but we don't have to do quite as much as we used to. And as a percentage of the total research dollars, it's come down a little bit. What about in our medical education area? Well, the McGaw Medical Center is our residency and fellowship integrated service organization. We have 1,254 residents and fellows. We've started a certificate program so they can get additional training in certain areas, and many of them leave their residency and fellowship with this additional certificate, identifying an area of interest that's important to them. I've done a lot of simulation-based education every year to improve the quality and reduce the costs of clinical care by our residents. Do a lot of work with catheter replacement, paracentesis, various other procedures that we feel have the most opportunity to improve the safety and quality of what we're doing. We've also attempted to increase the number of academic trainees. We have a new house staff research portal that allows our house staff to think about what kind of work they want to do. As we tell people in Feinberg, we know we're going to train a great doctor, but that's a minimal expectation. And we say, what else are you going to do to improve human health beyond the individual patient? And as a culture that's starting to take hold, it takes a while, but once we have a critical mass, life gets a lot easier in that regard. When we look at our current medical school class that started in August, we have 150 students. We're starting to shrink the size of that class. We'll be at 140, I think, this year or next. We take about 17 MSTP students every year. We're increasing that. For the last 6-7 years, there have been more women than men in that class, and this year we had 32% from traditionally underrepresented in medicine. So we have a very interesting group of students who have lots of ambition and accomplishment. We've been renovating all kinds of student space for them to learn in. We've renovated the library and put a Starbucks right in front of it, so they all go there now. And we're trying to create other kinds of relaxation and study space that appeal to them. I don't think I would sit in a beanbag chair myself, but apparently that's something they think is great. We made a decision to reduce the amount of gross anatomy that our students are exposed to. Most of it now is holographic representation of anatomy. We do a lot of that. They really like that. And then we do a lot of prosected anatomy, so they can come down to the anatomy lab once a week or something and poke around and look at structures that they've been talking about and looking at through their holographic work. That seems to be the new compromise, and it's allowed us to reduce the amount of cadaver acquisition that we've needed and allowed us to fill the curriculum with other things besides human dissection. One of the other big things that we did for the medical students through this integration was to create education-centered medical homes. We now have 40 of them across Chicago. These are places where faculty practice and groups of students from each class are in that practice for all 4 years, along with PAs and a few other things, and they all take care of the same panel of patients in that practice. And the fourth-year students teach the first years and so forth, and it's turned out to be pretty successful. I wasn't so convinced when I got there that this was the way to teach outpatient clinical medicine, but we actually did a study that we published, and it turned out that they made me wrong. So we decided to do it everywhere. It gives them a lot of longitudinal skill assessment, and the students like that kind of student-centered attention that they get in the practice community. We have a strong expectation for today for research by the students. We call it the area of scholarly concentration. Everybody has a project that they work on for 4 years, and it includes a thesis. And there were 393 documents published by class of 2022 and their mentors, so that was a pretty clear indication that they were spending some quality time. In our research day, they contribute their posters and their ideas. And this past year, we've started what we call the RISE program. It's a 5th-year program. It's tuition-free. They don't graduate until the end of the 5th year, so we can keep them away from the banks looking to collect their loans. And they stay as students, and they have a stipend, and they can work on a project and finish something they started back when they were M1s, or they can start something new. And people seem to really like that. We'd like to see that grow some more, but that's a long-term goal. What about the clinical progress and compensation? By the way, this picture is facing north at the campus, and the building right in front is the Ward building, the iconic neo-Gothic building that was built in 1926, and behind it is the Simpson Quarry. And off to the right is one of the adult hospital pavilions. Well, so through our integration, and we were able to acquire 11 hospitals in the adult practice with a high credit rating for over the last 20 years. When we look at our surveys of patient interest in health system, Northwestern Medicine clearly beats everything in Chicago by a great deal. If you look at the discharge zip codes of patients back in 2009 before we integrated, and today you can see that we have a much broader representation across greater Chicagoland. The objective of how we acquired hospitals and practice sites was that we wanted to cover sort of a half moon around the lake and be available with clinically integrated services to provide the right place for the right care at the right time. Our integration was not just simply an integration of the general ledger. All 11 hospitals have 33 corporate service functions that are fully integrated now. Supply chain, everything that you can think of regarding quality, external affairs, performance, marketing, access, security, integration. These are all key elements of how we make sure that we're trying to do the right thing in all of the locations that we have across our region. One of the big challenges we had, and we told all of the faculty and the chairs that we were going to be redoing the compensation plans when we completed integration. It took a few years to get us to the right place. But the compensation plans were department-based, secretive, many cases unwieldy, and in many cases insolvent. So we had to do something about that, and we made a decision that we would shrink the number of plans, and we gradually did that over time. We have now a productivity-based plan for most of the clinicians. We have a coverage-based plan for departments that are hospital-based, ER, anesthesia, radiology, pathology. We have a physician leadership plan and a physician scientist plan. So we're down to 4 plans, and the compensation is managed by an independent compensation committee made up of independent board of directors. I'm on that committee, but I'm not a member of it, so as the head of the hospital. And that's where we try and figure out how we're going to pay everyone on an annual basis and what changes we're going to make. There's a number of guiding principles that we've been able to adhere to. It's highly competitive, it's performance-based most of the time. It's sustainable, it's transparent, it's compliant with all laws and regulations. For the productivity plan for the clinicians, this is what we did, and this is pretty much what we do today. Start off with a salary somewhere at your base. If you work above your productivity target, which is set by a national benchmark, a blended benchmark from multiple data sets, if you work above that, we pay you an increase in your salary every quarter. We don't wait till the end of the year to see how things look. We incent people 4 times a year, and it causes them to pay attention year-round to how much they want to work. Occasionally, we stick some goal-based incentives in there, and we end up at the end of the year with a total salary. And then in the next year, we take 90% of total cash compensation to set next year's base, so that we don't become a bank hoping that people will work as effectively as they did in the previous year. Everybody has some risk in all of this. And people have gotten used to it. It works extremely well today. And we rarely have people leave Northwestern because of salary. Every clinician has a website. They can go look at it once a day, twice a day, every hour. They can work at it to their heart, look at it to their heart's content, tells them exactly what their performance is, and it's updated every night at 12:01. And so I don't think people go to it very often, but they do know it's there, and they do know that this is how their compensation is being calculated, and I think they take some comfort in that. One of the things that we ended up doing when we went to this compensation plan for clinicians, we got rid of all special deals. There wasn't an extra $3,000 to be nice to somebody on Saturday mornings or anything. None of that happened anymore. It was just pure, direct, productivity-based work. How do we look at this? Well, we have a productivity map. We have a total compensation at the 75th percentile, and then on the y-axis, and we have a work productivity at the 75th percentile on the x. And if you draw a line at about the 45-degree angle, that would be perfect alignment. And then we have different quadrants. Ideally, we'd like everybody to be in quadrant 1, or at least in quadrant 2 and 1. But generally, we think there's going to be a mix, because productivity compensation is a wonderful thing. Faculty don't come and say, I want to earn more money, because I just point them to the clinic and say, go work somewhere if you want to earn more money. And that seems to be the right approach, and people can make a decision about how much they want to work and whether they want to be extra busy certain times of the year or not. On the left side, when we started in 2015, we have the ideal line, and this dotted line is sort of where we were with all of our clinicians today. As we have let the productivity plan mature, those lines have gotten much closer together and much higher, and There's still some things that we need to touch up and fix in a few places, but by and large, we've matched productivity and compensation at the 75th percentile. Ten years later, we look at faculty turnover every year and follow it pretty closely. Last year, about 3.5% of our investigators left, mainly to take leadership positions somewhere. We have a team scientist track, which is faculty who do research but get paid small amounts for doing work on somebody's grant, like a biostatistician, a bioinformatician, those kind of people. They may have 3-4% on a bunch of grants, and that's how they pay their salary. That group is about 5%, and then clinicians is about 6%. So we have, by industry standards, a pretty low turnover of faculty, which we pay a lot of attention to. What are some of the other results of integration? Well, we spend a lot of time thinking about diversity. We have over 50 STEM K through 12 pipeline programs. We have programs that take students who graduate from high school, and it's called Year Up. It's a wonderful program, and we put, they spend 6 months learning how to be an employee, separate from us, and then they come and spend 6 months as interns in finance, research administration, a whole bunch of areas, and they learn how to craft in those areas, and then at the end of that year, they go out and get a job, and we hire probably 2/3 of them. And we've done a lot of work in that area. That's a very good program. I don't know whether it's here in Birmingham or not. We do a lot of DEI programming. We have great leadership in that area, and we continue to try and create an inclusive culture. And then, of course, like many medical schools, including your own, we sort of have a social justice interest that stemmed from all those catastrophes a few years ago, and we've done a lot of work to try and make issues that our students and staff and faculty have more palatable. Our capital campaign that we started back in 11, we just finished at the end of 2021. We raised about $3 billion in the medical school, and I think the overall campaign for the university was about $6.8 billion. So we've been able to apply a lot of that money to various programs and opportunities for us to be different. We have a very strong community engagement. The 3 hospitals in the medical school have a community engagement council, and so we don't duplicate efforts. We have over 1,200 programs in community partnership across Chicago. These little dots show you where all of them are at this point. There's not too many down in the lower right-hand corner because that's too near University of Chicago, and try and stay away from them. There are 453 active IRB protocols and over 300 partnership locations throughout the greater Chicago area. Gives our students and residents and some of our faculty a great opportunity to work on social issues that are out in the community that need attention and provide the kind of satisfaction that people want in their work environment. Because of our hiring of excellent people, we've continued to see growth in our external faculty honors and awards. And that continues to be a point of great interest. We have patents and copyrights that come out every year. We start anywhere from, I would say, 5 to 6 companies a year. Last year it was 9, and I'm not sure why, but there's a lot of entrepreneurial interest today in our faculty, so that all is hopeful and eventually may be revenue generating. Our URM faculty hiring is, I would say, good, but I think the numbers are deceiving, and I think it's a problem. in how we reflect what we've accomplished and what we're doing. If we go back to 2014, we had about 4.5% faculty that were considered underrepresented in medicine. Today it's close to 12. So we've had growth. We've gone from about 86 when I got here in 2011. We have about 250 now of underrepresented faculty. But, you know, the places also get bigger, and the denominator of people getting hired is also based on availability and interest. So using a percentage to describe anywhere what we're doing has some problems with it, I think. It also has the problem of the community saying, well, you know, technically Chicago's, you know, 40% minority. How come you don't have 40% of your faculty as minority? Well, I mean, no, somebody does, but hardly anybody does anywhere, because our underrepresented residents and fellows, they're great. They can go and do anything they want, and they do. And not everybody wants to be a medical school faculty member. So it becomes an interesting conundrum about how we reflect and make sure we celebrate the growth that we're seeing, but at the same time, we have this issue of, well, have we really done enough, and can we do more? And it's not so clear. I think when I graduated from medical school in 1975, there were 1,343 African Americans applying for residency. Last year, there were 1,373. You know, it's become a real problem in terms of the pipeline, and it's part of it is that, you know, males are disappearing from medical school because they're disappearing from college graduations, and you know, I think the professional world will be taken over by women here in the next 15 or 20 years, and to a very large extent, and I think that's great, but it's also a changing demographics. You're losing something and gaining something, so you don't have a lot of real incremental growth. What are the lessons we've learned from integration? Well, everybody has to want it for anything to happen. Everybody has to say, I don't like the way things are, we want to be different, we want to do something that makes us better. The parents need to be in the room to make the transition run smoothly, because occasionally a neck bolt needs to be tightened, and that requires some special skills. You have to have a detailed term sheet worked out with management before sharing it with boards, so that everybody's worked out how everything's going to work. You have to exchange some control for success. I think that was probably the biggest challenge for our department chairs, but it turned out well. Department chairs tend to think that controlling compensation is the most important job in the world, and I think it's the least important job in the world. It ought to be determined by the individual faculty member and how they want to work. You can spend 100% of your time trying to deal with people who don't like their compensation. That's not the life of a department chair. It ought to be recruiting great people, teaching, doing research. Anyway, as the health system grows financially, so should the school, and we do have now we get 1% of the top line revenue. That top line revenue, take out some of the state money, but that's a substantial amount of money, and then 5.5% of operating margin, absent construction costs and depreciation, because those two can wipe out a lot of operating margin. We have shared governance between organizations. So I chair the practice plan as the dean in the hospital, and I'm on the board, parent board of the health system, as is the president of the university, and the CEO of the hospital is a member of the board of trustees. We had a shared third-party counsel prepare all the documents. That was a brilliant decision, because, you know, lawyers fighting over commas you could spend years trying to get a document together. And this allowed us to move forward fairly expeditiously. We had to have a lot of transparency with stakeholders, a strong communication plan, And some of the legacy faculty will still be quick to put on war paint, and you have to be able to deal with that. But in the end, you know, I think if everybody wants to be in a different place, it's possible to make this happen. So this is what happened. This is how we spent the last 10 years or so, and it's a story that we're starting to think about in terms of what we're going to do in the next 10 years. I think I'll stop there and take any questions. Happy to.
Thank you, Dr. Neilson. Really impressive story of what you've accomplished at Northwestern. A lot of lessons for us to learn here. So open the floor for questions. I'm sure people, yes.
Thank you so much for your wonderful talk, Dr. Neilson. So my question is that why you are achieving that great success? I wonder what was the biggest challenge for you, and I wonder if you can share or address that concern.
I think the CEO of the hospital and I knew that if we could get integration done and in place, and we could get an effective compensation plan in place for everybody, there would be an enormous amount of organic growth. Maybe too much, too quick, who knows, but it grew pretty steady. The trick in all of this is aligning incentives. If the incentives aren't in line, it's very hard for people to feel like they've gotten a fair share of whatever success we've had. And that no different than the hospital or the medical school or an individual faculty member or department chair. So we spent a lot of time thinking about how to align the incentives so that everybody was pulling an oar in the right direction. And we certainly had to create fuel to make this work. So we had to think a lot about how we were going to ensure that our revenue would continue to grow and not do things that would cause us to stumble in that area. And we've had, you know, remarkable growth. I think in the beginning, you know, the practice plan was fighting with the hospital and the university for so long that nobody really thought it was possible to get along. And so we just had to sort of say, well, we're going to try. The only way we were able to do that is the dean historically was always the chairman of the board of the practice plan, but one of the department chairs was the CEO of the plan. And when I came, I insisted I become the CEO so I could help manage the overall conversation between all parties. And that took a little bit of doing. But I think once everybody realized how serious we were, things sort of fell in place. We have, yes, Tony?
Great presentation. Congratulations. That is remarkable. Do the departments have reserves on integration? And if they do, how did you manage that?
Yes, well, the practice plan had purchased one of the hospital buildings, so they had a debt code that they had with a bank, and that required them to maintain a certain amount of cash on hand. And we agreed that all of the assets of the departments would would transfer to the medical school, and we divided up all of those assets as a percentage of work RVUs over the last 5 years by department. So every department got an endowment. Some of them were bigger than others, but some departments had more clinical work than others. And we took $50 million, it was about $450 million that came over and went into the endowment. But we took $50 million of that and said every department would get an endowed share, and we would let that grow as an endowment. Now some departments have, most departments have at least 2 endowed chairs from integration. We think over the lifespan of what comes next, there'll be plenty of opportunity for departments to have endowed chairs to benefit from that. So we tried to do some things that would benefit the department without making it a competition between who raised the most money. kind of thing.
Question, Seth, and then Brian.
Thank you for sharing that wonderful story. It sounds like the formulaic funds flow is part of the secret sauce that keeps this working. Could you describe more what were the challenges in negotiating that and how it actually works?
Well, the health system wanted the practice plan, okay? I wanted to put it somewhere safe because it was uneven. It was like the Lord of the Flies. I mean, departments that were doing exceptionally well were, killing off departments that had very little sources of revenue. So it needed to be put in a safe place, and that was one of the goals. What is it that you'd like me to tell you? What is it that you'd like me to tell you? I'll tell you. If I just...
It's maybe for over here. How does it work now? I mean, it's 1% of the.
Oh, well, the CEO of the hospital and I worked out, we said that we did a lot of out-of-the-box thinking about what was possible. 1% of gross revenue, net a few state programs for Medicaid and stuff that we didn't take any money from. That made sense. If the hospital was going to acquire, the health system was going to acquire a bunch of hospitals, and the medical school ought to benefit from that. And then, an operating margin piece for everybody focus on making sure we had a cost-effective annual plan of operation for the health system. We weren't trying. No one was trying to take advantage of the other. It all seemed like reasonable requests. And when you can do some mapping of what that looks like over time, and it's about $110 million a year right now. All that money pretty much goes back to the departments because we're on an appropriation model, and it gets redistributed to cover cost share and a few other things.
Congratulations on telling this story about the growth. I heard you say that your med school class is actually going to decrease by 10.
Yeah.
That seems counterintuitive given your growth. What's the rationale for that?
Several. We want our medical students to have a good experience. We also have a PA program that needs clinical practice opportunities as students. But part of it is, I think by most standards, we're a pretty wealthy school, and the LCME beats up on us all the time for student debt. And, right now, we do an annual cost of education analysis for ourselves, just so we know what's going on. It's about $133,000 a year per student. Our tuition's pretty high. It's like $67 something. Well, I have to find another $60,000. Plus I have to find money for scholarships. So I'm thinking there's a point where it doesn't make sense to get any smaller because it becomes too much of a financial burden. But I think it's one of those perverse incentives that I think the LCME offered us. Just if we got smaller, we'd have less debt. Yeah.
Thank you again for the talk. Fantastic information. I'd love to get some of these slides. It would be great. Within the 11 hospitals, I'm going to presume that is not all medical school faculty, that these are not all closed medical staff. So what's the integration look like between the faculty and the community physicians?
Well, I would say 10 of those 11 hospitals are community hospitals by historic and most standards. Most of those hospitals are serviced by private practice physicians, but there's a growing number of physicians who are being employed by each hospital. And so we established a regional medical group for all those employed physicians. They all get a university appointment. It's a different kind of appointment. It's called a health system clinician appointment. It's rankless. Did I do something? I guess I went quiet. I wasn't moving enough. It's rankless because there's no real way that we can promote employed physicians in the community where there's no medical students or to teach or no residents to have or not much research being done. So we give them a faculty appointment so they can say they're a member of the faculty at Northwestern and have library privileges and an email address. And then they have a practice plan that our compensation committee also manages. And we structure it quite similarly to what we do with the Northwestern Medical Group academic practice.
Time for one more question. Dr. Neilson, we're facing significant challenges with workforce right now, post-COVID. How are you all dealing with that at Northwestern, both physician and nurses and other health professionals?
Well, the physician turnover has been good. It's been low. We have, as I said, our faculty doesn't really leave because they think they're being underpaid. The staff, we were open through most of COVID, the medical school, our labs were. Not everybody was in a full service environment, but everybody was making do and then started coming back. Virtually all of our lab faculty, trainees, and staff are back full-time every day. We have some administrative staff that our position in the school is you ought to be back 5 times a day if the students are back all the time and the residents are back all the time and the faculty is back all the time. Our staff should be back all the time. That wasn't a welcomed proclamation on my part, but it was what I said. And so I would say most of our staff are back 5 days a week, probably 25% are 4 days a week. We just say, this is who we are, this is what we do. It's taken a while for everybody to figure out how to make that work.
Well, thank you all very much. Mike, thank you, Dr. Neilson. Great talk, thank you. That was impressive. What you've done at Northwestern is unbelievable. We'll get you back to have a few more meetings.